Hello everybody. So next chapter, we're almost halfway. We're getting pretty close. So the Count of Monte Cristo, chapter 31, the presentation. When Albert was alone with Monte Cristo, he said, "Permit me to commence my office of Cicerone by showing you my bachelor quarters. Accustomed as you are to the palaces of Italy, it will be interesting for you to note in what a small square space a young man of Paris can live, and not feel that he is too badly off in regard to accommodation." Albert conducted the Count to his study, which was his favorite room. Monte Cristo was a worthy appreciator of all things Albert had collected here: old cabinets, Japanese porcelain, oriental stuffs, Venetian glass, weapons of all countries of the world. Everything was familiar to him, and he recognized at a glance their date and country of origin. Monte had expected to be the guide, whereas it was he who, under the Count's guidance, followed a course of archaeology, mineralogy, and natural history. He led his guest into the salon, which was filled with works of modern artists. There were landscapes by Dupré, Arabian horsemen by Delacroix, watercolors by Boulanger, paintings by Diaz, drawings by Descamps. In a word, all that modern art can give in exchange and as recompense for the art lost and gone with ages long since past. Albert expected to have something now to show the traveler, this time at least, but to his surprise, without looking for the signatures, many of which were only initials, the Count at once named the author of every picture in such a manner that it was easy to see that each man was not only known to him, but that each style had been appreciated and studied. From the salon they passed into the bedchamber. It was a model of good taste and simple elegance. One portrait only, signed Leopold Robert, loomed forth from an unpolished gilt frame. It was this portrait that first of all attracted the Count's attention, for he took 3 rapid steps across the room and suddenly stopped in front of it. It was the portrait of a young woman of about 5 or 6 and 20, with a dark complexion, eyes which glowed beneath languishing eyelids. She wore the picturesque costume of a Catalan fisherwoman, a red and black bodice, and had golden pins stuck in her hair. She was looking at the sea, and her beautiful profile was outlined against the twofold azure sky and ocean. "This is a beautiful woman you have here, Viscount," said Monte Cristo in a perfectly calm voice, "and her dress, doubtless a ball dress, suits her charmingly." "That," Albert said, "is my mother's portrait. She had it painted 6 or 8 years ago during the Count's absence. Doubtless she thought to give him a pleasant surprise upon his return, but strange to say he did not like the portrait and could never get over his antipathy to it. Between ourselves, I must tell you that Monsieur de Morcerf is one of the most hard-working peers at the Luxembourg, and as a general is renowned for theory, but is an indifferent connoisseur of works of art. It is not so with my mother, who paints remarkably well, and who, esteeming such a work too good to part with altogether, gave it to me to hang up in my room, where it would be less exposed to Monsieur de Morcerf's displeasure. Forgive my talking so much of family matters, but as I shall have the honor of introducing you to the Count, I tell you this lest you should praise this portrait before him. The portrait seems to have a malign influence, for my mother rarely comes to the room without looking at it, and still more rarely does she look at it without weeping. The appearance of this portrait in the house is, however, the only contention between my mother and father, who are still as united today, after more than 20 years of married life, as they were on their wedding day. And now that you have seen all my treasures, will you accompany to Monsieur de Morcerf, to whom I wrote from Rome, giving an account of your service you rendered me and announcing your visit? I may say that both the Count and the Countess are anxious to tender you their thanks. Look upon this visit as an initiation into Paris life, a life of formalities, visits, and introductions." Monte Cristo bowed without replying. He accepted the proposal without enthusiasm and without regret, as one of those society conventions which every gentleman looks upon as a duty. Albert called his valet and ordered him to announce to Monsieur and Madame Morcerf the arrival of the Count of Monte Cristo. On entering the salon, they found themselves face to face with Monsieur de Morcerf himself. He was a man of 40 to 45 years of age, but he appeared at least 50. His black mustache and eyebrows contrasted strangely with his almost white hair, which was cut short in the military fashion. He was dressed in civilian clothes and wore in his buttonhole the ribbons indicating the different orders to which he belonged. "Father," said the young man, "I have the honor to introduce to you the Count of Monte Cristo, the generous friend I had the good fortune to meet in the difficult circumstances with which you are acquainted." "You are a welcome guest among us," said the Count de Morcerf with a smile. In preserving the life of our only heir, you have rendered our house a service which solicits our eternal gratitude." So saying, the Count de Morcerf gave Monte Cristo an armchair, while he seated himself opposite the window. In taking the chair indicated to him, Monte Cristo arranged himself in a manner as to be hidden in the shadow of the large velvet curtains, whence he could read on the careworn features of the Count a whole history of secret griefs in each one of the wrinkles time had imprinted there. "The Countess was at her toilette when your visit was announced," said Morcerf. "She will join us here in 10 minutes or so." "It is a great honor for me," said Monte Cristo, "that on the very day of my arrival at Paris I should be brought into contact with a man whose merits equal his reputation, and on whom Dame Fortune, acting with equity for once, has never ceased to smile. But has she not in the Micha Plains or the Atlas Mountains still the baton of a marshal to offer you?" "I have left the service, monsieur," said Morcerf, turning somewhat red. "Created a peer at the Restoration, I served during the first campaign under Maréchal de Beaumont. I was therefore entitled to a higher rank, and who knows what would have happened had the elder branch remained on the throne. But the July Revolution was apparently glorious enough to permit of ingratitude, and it was indeed inappreciative of any service that did not date from the imperial period. I therefore tendered my resignation. I have hung out my sword and have flung myself into politics. I devote myself to industry and study of the useful arts. I was anxious to do so during the 20 years I was in the army, but had not the time." "Such are the ideas that render your nation superior to all others," replied Monte Cristo. "A gentleman of high birth, in possession of a large fortune, you were content to gain your promotion as an obscure soldier. Then, after becoming a general, a peer of France, a commander of the Legion of Honor, you are willing to go through another apprenticeship with no other prospects, no other reward than that one day you will serve your fellow creatures. Really, Count, that is most praiseworthy. It is even more than that. It is sublime." "If I were not afraid of wearying you, Count," continued the general, obviously charmed with Monte Cristo's manners, "I would have taken you to the chamber with me. Today's debate will be very interesting to such as do not know our modern senators. I should be most grateful to you, Count, if you would renew this invitation another time. I have been flattered with the hope of an introduction to the Countess today, and I will wait for her." "Ah, here is my mother," exclaimed Albert. And in truth, as Monte Cristo turned round, he saw Madame de Morcerf, pale and motionless, on the threshold of the door. As Monte Cristo turned toward her, she let fall her arm, which, for some reason, she had been resting against the gilt doorpost. She had been standing there for some seconds, and had overheard the last words of the conversation. Monte Cristo rose and bowed low to the Countess, who curtsied ceremoniously without saying a word. "Whatever ails you, madam?" said the Count. "Perhaps the heat of this room is too much for you?" "Are you ill, mother?" exclaimed the Viscount, rushing toward Mercedes. She thanked them both with a smile. "No," said she, "it has upset me a little to see for the first time him without whose intervention we should now be in tears and mourning. Monsieur, it is to you that I owe my son's life," she continued, advancing with queenly majesty, "and I bless you for this kindness. I am also grateful to you for giving me the opportunity of thanking you as I have blessed you. That is from the bottom of my heart. Madame the Count and yourself reward me too generously for a very simple action. To save a man and thereby to spare a father's agony and a mother's feelings is not to do a noble deed. It is but an act of humanity." These words were uttered with the most exquisite softness and politeness. "It is very fortunate for my son, Count, that he has found such a friend," replied Madame de Morcerf, "and I thank God it is so." And Mercedes raised her beautiful eyes to heaven with an expression of such infinite gratitude that the Count fancied he saw 2 tears trembling in them. Monsieur de Morcerf went up to her. "Madame, I have already made my excuses to the Count," said he. "The session opened at 2 o'clock. It is now 3, and I have to speak." "Go along, then. I will try to make up to the Count for your absence," said the Countess in the same tone of deep feeling. "Will you do us the honor, Count, of spending the rest of the day with us?" she continued, turning to Monte Cristo. Believe me, Countess, no one could appreciate your kind offer more than I do, but I stepped out of my traveling carriage to your door this morning and know not yet where or how my residence is provided for. I know it is but a slight cause for uneasiness, yet it is quite appreciable. Then we shall have the pleasure another time. Promise us that, at least. Monte Cristo bowed without replying, but his gesture might as well have been taken for assent. Then I will not detain you longer, said the Countess. I would not have my gratitude become indiscreet or inappropriate. Importunate. Different word. Monte Cristo bowed once more and took his leave. A carriage was waiting for him at the door. The illustrious travel sprung into it, the door was closed behind him, and the horse went off at a gallop, yet not so quickly that the Count did not notice an almost imperceptible movement which fluttered the curtain in the salon where he had just left Madame de Monte. When Albert returned to his mother, he found her reclining in a deep velvet armchair in her boudoir. "What is the name of Monte Cristo?" asked the Countess when the servant had gone out. "Is it a family name, the name of an estate, or simply a title?" "I think it is nothing more than a title. The Count has bought an island in the Tuscan archipelago. Otherwise, he lays no claim to nobility and calls himself a Count of Chance, though the general opinion in Rome is that he is a very great lord." "He has excellent manners," said the Countess, "at least so far as I could judge during the few moments he was here." The Countess was pensive for a moment. Then, after a short pause, she said, "I am addressing a question to you, Albert, as your mother. You have seen Monsieur de Monte Cristo at home. You are perspicacious, know the ways of the world, and are more tactful than most men of your age. Do you think the Count is really what he appears to be?" "And what is that?" "You said it yourself a minute ago, a great lord." "I told you, mother, that he was considered as such. But what do you think of him yourself, Albert?" "I must own I do not quite know what to make of him. I believe he is a Maltese." "I am not questioning you about his origin, but about himself." "Ah! That is an entirely different matter. I have seen so many strange traits in him that if you wish me to say what I think, I must say that I consider him as a man whom misfortune has branded, a derelict, as it were, of some old family, who, disinherited from his patrimony, has found by dint of his own venturesome genius, which places him above the rules of society. Monte Cristo is an island in the middle of the Mediterranean, without inhabitants or garrison, the resort of smugglers of every nationality and of pirates from every country. Who knows whether these worthy industrialists do not pay their lord for his protection?" "Possibly," said the Countess, deep in thought. "What does it matter," replied the young man, "whether he be a smuggler or not? Now that you have seen him, mother, you must agree that the Count of Monte Cristo is a remarkable man who will create quite a sensation in Paris." "Has this man any friendship for you, Albert?" she asked with a nervous shudder. "I believe so, mother. And you? Are you fond of him?" "I like him in spite of Franz d'Epinay, who always tries to convince me that he is being returned from the other world." There was a strange terror in the Countess's voice as she said, "Albert, I have always put you on your guard against new acquaintances. Now you are a man and capable of giving me advice. Nevertheless, I repeat to you, be prudent, Albert. Yes, if this advice is to be profitable, mother, I must know in advance what I am to guard against. The Count does not gamble. He drinks nothing but water colored with a little Spanish wine. He is said to be so rich that, without making himself a laughing-stock, he could not borrow money from me. What, then, have I to fear from him?" "You are right," said the Countess. "My fears are stupid, especially when directed against a man who has saved your life. By the way, did your father receive him nicely, Albert? It is important that we should not receive him like a mere stranger. Your father is sometimes preoccupied, his business worries him, and it may be that unintentionally—" "My father was perfect, mother," Albert broke in. "What is more, he seemed greatly flattered by 2 or 3 clever and appropriate compliments the Count paid him with such ease that he might have known him for 30 years. They parted the best of friends." The Countess did not answer. She was so deeply absorbed in her own thoughts that her eyes gradually closed. The young man stood before her, looking down on her with filial affection, which is more tender and loving in children whose mother is still young and beautiful. Then, seeing her close her eyes, he listened for a moment to hear her peaceful breathing and tiptoed out of the room. Okay. That was a shorter one than we've had in the last little while, but games are afoot. We'll see what happens with the Count and Countess de Monte and the Count of Monte Cristo. Have a good one.